What's up, guys? I just ate a gross amount of Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm bloated, but I'm goated. It's me, Chris Raufeisen, stand-up comic, history nerd, spreading knowledge and dropping facts. I thought I was gonna say spreading ass cheeks, spreading knowledge, dropping facts. All right. Today we're gonna be looking at an ancient ruin not a ton of people are familiar with. Of course, I'm talking about the hotly disputed megalithic site of Ganung Padang in Indonesia. This site has recently been featured in Netflix's Ancient Apocalypse, starring History Daddy and Netflix GOAT Graham Hancock. But if you are a total autistic ancient history nerd like me, then maybe this place has been on your radar for a long time. I'm pretty sure it's also been talked about on early Joe Rogan episodes, before Spotify and probably in Nat Geo, maybe some other things on YouTube, right? So it's out there. All right. Now, what is this place? So what is Ganung Padang? If you were to travel to the island of Java and take a train or a private car or a rickshaw west to the Regency or province of Cianjur, you would find among the hilly coffee plantations and farms a mountain peak that is home to the ancient temple complex of Ganung Padang. 5 terraces, thousands, maybe even millions of stones, intentionally placed. It's all pretty fucking crazy. Anyways, here's why it's so controversial. Okay, so long story short, most scientists preach that the site is around 1,000, maybe 2,000 years old. But one Indonesian scientist has challenged this belief with his own field research, and he says, dead ass, this site is anywhere from 9,000 to 20,000 years old, which completely throws a wrench into traditional histories of Indonesia and of the greater scope of human history. So these claims got conventional archaeologists and researchers fucking heated. So we're going to pick this apart a little bit. We're going to take a look at the controversy. We'll take a look at the methodology, the research. We'll look at the site ourselves. And, of course, we'll have some fun with the facts. So let's start with the discovery of Ganung Padang. And when I say discovery, I mean by a white guy, obviously. All right, because they're the guys that write history. All right, so the site of Ganung Padang was first mentioned by a Dutch geologist named Rogier Verbeek, who was told about the site by a fellow white guy in the region. All we know about him is his last name is Descourt. Now, obviously, local people probably knew about Ganung Padang for like centuries, but their claims don't matter because it was the 1890s and they weren't white. So, this is when Ganung Padang is first clocked in on the archaeological record. And it gets mentioned in Verbeek's publication, which comes out in 1891. Sidebar, in case you're wondering what's a Dutch guy doing in Indonesia, let's just do a quick run-through of colonization in Indonesia. All right, and let's start with the Majapahit Empire. All right, so they're the ones that dominated Java in the Middle Ages, basically. But they collapsed. All right, the Majapahits were Hindu. They collapsed. And then the Abbasid Caliphate, they were the big dicks, and basically the Muslims just expanded into the Indonesian archipelago. Everyone in the island chain basically converted to Islam. A little bit later, the Portuguese came through. They conquered different ports and cities, major hubs, and established a pretty successful spice trade until the Dutch came. Later on, around the late 1600s, they defeated the Portuguese in a bunch of battles, basically, and just ended up just ganking their shit, just taking that shit and replacing the Portuguese, straight up just corporate takeover style. Okay. And they did all this for spices, by the way. This is why they did that, right? For things like pepper. All right. I don't even think pepper's that good of a spice, but apparently it's worth killing and enslaving hundreds and thousands, maybe even millions of indigenous people, and just dominating territory for centuries. Is it worth it? I don't know. Whatever. It happened. All right. So, anyways, that's why the Dutch guy was there. All right. Well, that's why there's Dutch people there. Verbeek was there specifically because he was a geologist. And, interestingly enough, in Indonesia, a couple years earlier, in 1883, there was a volcanic eruption at Mount Krakatoa, a massive volcanic eruption that absolutely fucked the earth, actually, for a few years. It put so much ash cloud into the atmosphere that it actually blocked sunlight for like a year, and everything got like a degree cooler. It was like a mini ice age almost. It kind of fucked shit up for a minute. Anyways, so this whole area, Indonesia, it was a hotbed for studying, earthquakes and seismic activity, volcanoes, shit like that, tectonic plates. So you had like, a bunch of white guys there with their fucking pith hats, walking around with slaves, and they're probably walking around with their magnifying glasses, trying to solve mysteries and shit, whatever. I don't know, whatever colonists did back in the day. All right, but they were there. So Rogier Verbeek mentions it in his publication in 1891. And after that, there's just a visit here or there by some white explorers, but nothing too groundbreaking until 1979, when farmers in the area bring it to the national spotlight, and it gets a ton of press. Research organizations begin conducting fieldwork. The government steps in, starts funding research, and things really pick up starting in the 80s. Okay. So before we get to all the fun, crazy theories, all right, let's just go and take a quick look at the standing theories, the theories that are accepted and in play to this day. All right. So Lufti Yundri of the Bureau of Archaeology, I always fucked that up. So Lufti Yundri, archaeologist of the Bureau of Archaeology in Indonesia, dates the site of Gunung Padang from the 2nd to the 5th century Common Era, so 200 to 500 AD. Another guy, Harry Truman, Semanchuk, you're going to love that name, Harry Truman. So maybe it makes sense they would name their kid after the guy who dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese. Anyways, Harry Truman Semanchuk, well-known archaeologist in Indonesia, dates the site from 6th to 8th century Common Era. All right, so that's the year 600 to the year 800 Common Era. Now, here's where things get interesting. Dr. Danny Hillman Natuwijaja of Caltech, all right, he's an Indonesian Caltech graduate, holder of a PhD, senior geologist at the Research Center for Geotechnology at Indonesia's Institute of Sciences. Okay, he's been working at the site for quite a long-ass time, and he concludes from core sampling that the site of Gunung Padang has several periods of construction. The top two layers date from 3,000 to 6,000 years ago, and at a depth of 15 meters or 50 feet, he found remains from an earlier period of construction that dates back 9,600 years. And then he went further, and at a depth of 100 feet, he found materials in the core sampling that date back 24,000 years. So he says. In case you don't know what a drill core is, let me just explain real quick. When researchers do a drill core, they can actually drill up a solid cylinder of earth from the ground, and they can take that cylinder and look at the different layers of soil. All right, they call that the stratigraphy. All right, it's just a fancy way to say different layers of soil, and they can match up those layers to actual time periods and say, this layer of soil is from this year, this layer is from this year, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, here's the iffy thing about core samples, right? When you're drilling, you're actually displacing sediment, and there's a chance that the drill is moving material to different layers as the drill is rotating. So you got to take core samples with a grain of salt. So sometimes when you pull up a core sample, you get some kind of datable material, right? Some kind of organic material, and when that happens, you can run a carbon dating test or a radiocarbon dating test or a carbon-14 test. It's all the same shit. Basically, the science behind this is that all living things absorb carbon from the surrounding atmosphere or environment when they're alive, including this natural isotope, carbon-14, right? Which is, 6 carbon protons and then 8 neutrons, all right, for you fucking nerds out there. Anyway, when that plant or animal dies, okay, it stops absorbing, but the carbon-14 that is accumulated over its lifetime begins to decay, and you can actually measure the rate of that decay and find out when that organism was alive. And as legitimate as that sounds, it's actually not an exact science, right? There's a degree of error that could take place. There could be a lab contamination. Someone could touch it and fuck it up. There's all types of shit that could happen. And Dr. Natawujaja's core samples and his findings actually got archaeologists heated, right? So much so that 34 Indonesian archaeologists and geologists actually signed a petition questioning his motives and his methodologies. You know, there's all types of accusations that he rushed the excavation. He failed to properly document layers of soil. There was a time where he got government support, right? So he was actually given soldiers to help him excavate, and they say he excavated way too fast and they just blew past layers of soil, that they pulled out stones and didn't record the original context of the things he moved around. Basically, he ignored all the conventional practices of archaeology, and that led all the other researchers to say that his project at Ganung Padang was a total shit show. You know, and it's kind of true from a conventional archaeologist point of view. I can see why there's a lot of issues with how he conducted his fieldwork. Like, for instance, when working with sediment, right, most people wouldn't do a core sample. They would do something called an optical stimulated luminescence test. And I'm not sure on the exact science behind this, but basically, you can take sediment and doing some kind of shit with photons and electrons, basically you can find out when the last time that sediment was exposed to sunlight. And apparently this is pretty common practice. It's something that's in a lot of archaeologists' toolbox. And he didn't whip it out and use it, so he got put on blast for that. On top of that, this is also a good time to point out that he never published any findings, at least not in any official capacity, which is what his contemporaries are also pretty pissed off about. Usually after an archaeological dig, the data is published, the methods of how samples were collected and gathered, analysis of the findings, pictures and images of the data being gathered. All that is published, and this allows other researchers in the field to interpret his data and call out any mistakes or any discrepancies or come to their own conclusions, and this hasn't happened yet. And this site was excavated in 2014. It's not unheard of for research to take a really, really long time to publish. But, you know, he hasn't published anything yet, and he's published other works as well. So some would say that's pretty sus. The only data he's kind of publicized was at the American Geophysics Conference in 2018, where he put out a pamphlet about his research with ground-penetrating radar, which is a lot nicer than ass-penetrating radar. He revealed that beneath Ganung Padang were 3 hollow chambers. But again, his research was met with a lot of skepticism because ground-penetrating radar actually detects the density of soil. So these hollow chambers that he found could also be interpreted as pockets of soft sediment. But then, you know, but who knows? Maybe he's right. The only way to know for sure is to actually get down and dirty and just Viet Cong style, just dig down and find out for ourselves. Now, regardless of the flaws in his research and the absence of any official publications, all right, the theory that Dr. Natawujaja and Dr. Graham Hancock have put forth at this site, that it was built by peoples in the far distant past, many thousands of years ago, that still makes more sense to me than any standing theories today. Just because their methods have some discrepancies doesn't mean that these other theories are correct, all right? The fact remains that this shit is real, all right? Someone built it, and nothing at this site has been found to conclusively deem it from 500 AD or whatever it says on Wikipedia. In fact, if you go to Wikipedia right now and look at Ganung Padang, you'll find that it was built in the year 500 AD by the Sundanese king Silwangi, who was a semi-legendary Hindu king from pre-Islamic times. But here's the thing. If you look at any other Hindu or Buddhist temples built at 500 AD, if you look anywhere in the region, right, all of those monuments, all those buildings have clear iconography. They have clear symbolism, either engraved, inscripted, or even built into the architecture, all right? And at Ganung Padang, you find none of these things. If you actually look at contemporary monuments in Southeast Asia, other Hindu Buddhist kingdoms in the area, like in Vietnam, they have at least one from Funan times, right? This 4th century trading empire based in Cambodia, right? You have at least one temple, and it's clearly Hindu. You can kind of see the iconography. You can see the symbology. Same thing in Thailand. You have Sitep, In central Thailand, it was built around somewhere between the year 500 to 600, right? You have this kind of step pyramid. And again, you can clearly tell that, the people that built this were at least, they were Hindu or they were at least Indianized, if that makes sense. And of course, you have Hindu temples in India that go back, even older than 500 AD. And those guys, when they built their Hindu temples, it is clearly Hindu. There is an abundance of iconography and symbology and styles to just suggest that this is definitely Hindu or this is definitely Hindu Buddhist. Not to mention the Sundanese, the people that they say built this stuff, actually didn't even build anything remotely like this anywhere ever. So my notion is that this site predates any type of dynastic Hindu or Buddhist influence on the island of Java. So now's a good time to walk through the site, mainly on Google Earth, and I will categorically show you some things that'll raise your eyebrows more than an Indonesian plastic surgeon. So you take the stairs up to this terrace, right? I don't know how many steps there are, but in ancient engineering, all right, it's important to remember that everything has a meaning, okay? So however many steps there are, I've heard that there's 360, I've heard there's 370, I've heard there's 400, but whatever that number is, it means something, all right? That's just how ancient people built shit, okay? It's not like today where everything's kind of just random bullshit, all right? Everything had a meaning back then. And speaking of things with meaning, let's talk about the orientation of Ganung Padang, all right? It sits on a northwest by southwest axis. And I don't know if you know this, but in ancient Hindu and even in Buddhist temples, all entrances actually face east. They face towards the sunrise, right? The sun is the giver of energy. All things start with the sun, all right? Another reason why I think that Ganung Padang predates any type of Buddhist or Hindu influence. Now, I want to talk about these stones, but first I want to talk about some shit that's absolutely crazy if it's true. They say that at this first terrace, at this little rectangular room with the paved stones, all right, there's a vortex of electromagnetic energy. And if you go there with a compass, all right, the needle of your compass will go batshit crazy. Someone, if you're in the area, go fucking fact check this shit, all right? Someone go find out if this is real. If you go there, pull out a compass, make a TikTok, make an Instagram reel, tag me in that shit. Because if this is the case, then does that mean that the pyramid or the hill of Ganung Padang can it collect and concentrate electromagnetic energy? And if so, what does that tell you about the level of engineering that went down here? Is there something that they understand about electromagnetic energy that we don't? If it's true, I vote yes, because I don't know shit about electromagnetic energy. I don't know shit. So the compass thing, if that proves to be true, I mean, that's not nothing. Moving on to these rocks, all right? Now, these rocks are called columnarly jointed basaltic andesite. It's a type of volcanic rock, and it gets its unique shape because when a lava flow cools, it breaks apart evenly, and these pieces contract inward, making this hexagonal column. And you can actually find this at volcanic sites all over the world. And it's worth noting that columnarly jointed basaltic andesite is used for construction at Ganung Padang and at one other site that we know of on the planet, all the way on the other end of the island chain, all right, all the way out in the Pacific Rim, in Micronesia at the site of Nan Madol, another fascinating place, steeped in mystery. But that's another rabbit hole for another day. Anyways, another remarkable thing about Ganung Padang is that the stones you see all over this hilltop came from somewhere else. It's mentioned by Hancock and Dr. Nathuwijaja briefly, but these stones are not native to the hilltop. They were brought from around the region. They didn't touch too much on this, but this is a massive endeavor. All right, the amount of manpower to quarry and carry all these rocks up that hill would have been enormous. Thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands, for many years at the very, very least. Another massive feat of ancient engineering that we really can't put a finger on. Now, if I could speculate for a minute, remember when you have a giant workforce, all right, they need to eat something. And if you look around Ganung Padang, tell me what you see. You see rice terraces. But according to mainstream archaeology, rice cultivation didn't exist on Java until the 800s. You actually find it in tax inscriptions, right? Kings levied it as a tax. They would collect it from the common people. But the people who built Ganung Padang probably numbered in the thousands, and they needed to eat something. So what did they eat? And where did they grow it? Also, farming rice sucks, right? So that's why you have domesticated animals. We call them beasts of burden, oxen, water buffalo, to pull the plows, stuff like that. And you have such beasts of burden that exist in the region at the time. All right, we found actually I didn't do shit. I didn't find it, but people have found cave paintings of Banteng dating back 10,000 BC and caves in Borneo. So we know that beasts of burden existed. So maybe there was an age of rice cultivation or domestication of animals that we just simply don't know about. That's pretty interesting stuff. That's a thread right there. Go ahead, you can pull on that if you want. So when you reach that first terrace, you're going to see 1,000 stones, some thrown about, but some neat and orderly, outlining rooms, rectangles, some paved into the ground or configured like walls or perimeters. Now back to the terrace, another thing you'll notice are these mounds, right? Now when I see a mound, my reflex is, okay, tomb, burial, right? There's a dead body in there. However, absolutely no human remains have ever been discovered on Ganung Padang. I know, bummer. So despite the disagreements between researchers, it's kind of unanimously agreed upon that this is a ceremonial site. So as you travel into the terrace, you reach this pretty intense slope that's just covered in stones. And this is actually believed to once be a retaining wall. Now here's the kooky part. This retaining wall actually wraps itself around the hill. And if you look on the sides of the hill, you find more retaining walls, one on top of the other, like concentric rings that reach all the way to the top. And in between the stones have been identified what they call a geopolymer, which is a binding substance that can occur naturally or artificially. All right, another point of contention here at Gunung Padang. So as you climb the retaining wall and ascend to that next level, right, you find 4 more terraces, each one with a slight difference in elevation and more stones scattered about and outlining each perimeter all the way to the final terrace, which is the highest point on the hilltop. And you got to think, that's got to be a pretty important spot, right? What used to be here? Was there a high priest? Was there a shrine? Maybe some type of cosmological alignment you could only see from this spot. Is there more electromagnetic energy that we don't know about at this point? All right, the jury's still out. We really don't know much about this place. To wrap up, this place is absolutely incredible. So many questions. Whoever built this shit, I'm glad you did this. Shout out to all the ancient Indonesian dudes. And I would say women too, but traditionally probably not building stuff. But, they're probably around. So shout out to all those guys for really blowing our minds with this one. You guys really crushed it here. Now, going forward, what I think needs to happen is the Indonesian government needs to just throw money at this thing and literally get to the bottom of it. Literally, like get down and find out whether those hollow chambers are man-made or natural. All right, and while you're at it, why don't you clear out the sides of the hill, all right, take down all the trees and find out whether it's a pyramid or not, all right? And if it's not a pyramid, it's fine. You can just, take some seeds and grow those trees back. I'd say drill out a new core sample, a couple core samples, right? Hit the lab up, take them for some optical stimulating luminescence tests. Take a couple compasses out, walk around, see if they go haywire, where they go haywire. Get an engineer on scene, right? Have him come estimate the scope of the work, how many people, how long it took, the weight of the bricks, right? Calculate some shit. And of course, you got to go hit up that final terrace all the way in back there, dig down to the layer where the high priest probably stashed, a bunch of skulls of virgins that he used to drink the blood of newborn babies from, ancient people shit. I'll be honest with you, I'm rooting for a lost civilization, all right? And even though the current research is kind of flawed and heavily scrutinized, that doesn't make any of the other standing theories any better. Judging from all the things we talked about today, I think this place, in my opinion, clearly predates any type of Hindu or Buddhist influence on the island. Also it just looks ancient as fuck. Come on, guys. Anyways, I hope they get to the bottom of it. I hope they figure this shit out. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to correct me on something, if you want to add some new information, or if you just want to call me an idiot, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I appreciate you listening. Signing out from Parts Unknown, I've been Chris Raufeisen. See you next time.